All right. Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to the third session of the IT Professionals Conference. We will have Jonathan Dedering presenting on how to empower expert authors with the KnowledgeBase API. Jonathan is the Web Operations Manager for the UW-Madison Office of Human Resources. He has skills as a web developer in the advertising industry, working for clients such as Culver's and Fiskars, before joining UW-Madison in 2017 as a software engineer with Dedering Platform Services. He specializes in WordPress development and provides consultation on many topics, including design, data analytics, and information architecture. And in today's session, if you have any questions for his areas of expertise, you're welcome to raise your hand. There will also be time for questions at the end. But without further ado, Jonathan Dedering.
Thanks. All right. Hopefully everybody can hear me. So I know I'm the only person standing between you and lunch, and I see the sandwiches getting lined up outside. So I'm going to try to be as quick as I can, but we'll see how we do. So before I get started, I want to thank the KB team. We got a bunch of them in here. KB team's a great team to work with. I've had the pleasure to work with them for a number of years now, and this system that I'm going to be talking about has been an enormous asset for us in the project that we'll be talking about. Let's just get going. Uh-oh. First problem. We're using this. There we go. Cool. So, is anybody familiar with ATP or Workday? So there's a lot that's went on behind the scenes in this project, and many of you are probably involved on some level. DeWitt's been really involved. HR groups across this campus and other campuses. There's been a lot of work that's went on behind the scenes. On my end, most of what I've been involved with is helping to share information about the changes to the HR community. So what's changing, when those changes are happening, what the new processes are, and what to do during those transition periods. So this was just an absolutely massive project. For us, it was a really pretty big project. We published over 100 documents and reviewed over 1,000 pre-existing documents that we thought might need to either be removed or updated. And most of this was happening while there was day-to-day work being completed. So in this presentation today, we're going to discuss some of the strategies that we used during this project. We'll look at how we use the KB API from a technical perspective, and then we're going to talk a little bit about the project management perspective of this and how we used the API to create efficiencies and avoid bottlenecks when we were working with the subject matter experts who were providing the information. So let's start with July 7th. Workday is going live on July 7th. The systems have changed, business processes have changed, and every employee is being impacted in some way. There were a lot of hurdles. First off, there's a lot of change on one day, one big go live day. There's a lot of cutover activities that are taking place within the HR teams, things that need to happen on a certain date that will allow it to become active on the date that it goes live. But overall, there's one big go live date of July 7th when there's just a massive amount of things that are going to be happening and going live all together. So that means that our focus is on a lot of things all at once. But not all these changes are actually happening at once. The cutover activities that the HR teams need to do generally are based around a window of time when something needs to happen before a certain date for something to be in place after another date. So there's a lot of cutoffs, and these cutover activities are very specific sets of instructions that these teams need to follow. For example, we don't want you to get a raise in the old system and then we move to a new system and you don't have a raise. We don't want the data to be mismatched in any way. So the processes that these HR teams are using to go from one system to the next, it's not as simple as just transferring data. It's a matter of how do we stop a process that we're currently doing, like hiring an employee? Where is the stopping point in the old system and where is the starting point in the new system? And there's so many processes and there's a lot of variation. This is where this gets to be really pretty tricky. So we're relaying a ton of information, as you can see. Our documents are written by dozens of HR subject matter experts, and they represent many functional areas such as recruitment, benefits, compliance, and other HR communities. So as I said before, we've published over 100 documents with the system that I'm going to talk about today. But beyond that, there's been a lot of other supplementary materials and communications that have also gone on behind the scenes. And here's one of the biggest challenges. This is where this system has really come in the clutch, is that with each document that we publish, we're increasing the frequency of change requests. Right, so at some point, we're going to publish so many documents that the maintenance of that information can become really overwhelming. So how can we actually manage that much change? You know, I've been looking at this spring thinking, around this time, around June, I'll have already created so much that there's going to be a ton of last minute changes. How can I manage those last minute changes when we're talking about so much volume? And at what point is that going to create mistakes? When is that going to create delays? And how are we going to manage the scalability of that? Because in addition to just rolling out the changes, there's reviews and approvals that need to take place. A lot of the information that we've published has, you know, medium to high stakes on it. As I said, with you getting a raise, is that going to be in place? Your paycheck, right? That's going to be pretty important. Your time off balances, leave requests, things like that. You count on those. So the processes in the information that explain the processes to transition from the old system to the new has to be accurate. Period. So each of these challenges add to the complexity of the overall project, and the complexity is what can really slow us down. So people here familiar with context switching, the term that goes around? Okay. It's really the idea that the time it takes from working on something, moving to another thing, and then getting back to the original task adds up really fast, and there's a huge cost to that. So even if it's just a question you get in a Teams chat, getting back to your work, there's always a cost, and that impacts us heavily on projects like this, where we're publishing 100 or more documents. When we're working on one, we're working with one team, then we move on to work with another one, and then we go back to the other. And you do that over and over, and I'm sure some of you have experienced the 5 conversations at once over a Teams chat scenario. It's never fun. And what this results in is a bottleneck. All roads lead to one place, a bottleneck. When fans are leaving Camp Randall, sometimes there's 75,000 leaving the stadium after a game. And when you're driving home, you're going onto these really crammed streets, and you're not going to go anywhere until the person in front of you moves. So to avoid the bottlenecks, we need to think about what's within our control, and then what can we do to change the situation to improve it for us. So we rethought our process. We set some goals: provide a quick turnaround, apply a consistent layout to the documents, maintain an intuitive and consistent navigation. And the key to this was prevent the change request from consuming the time that my team needs to consult with our subject matter experts and actually help them create better information throughout this process. We don't want to just be in the position of only loading things onto a website. We actually want to help them manage the information architecture so that it matches that of other documents, and it becomes intuitive and easy to use for the readers. And we've been successful with this. We've accomplished those goals. We've avoided the bottleneck. Our future state is really the focus right now. And we don't really have a major backlog, thanks to this system that we'll get to take a look at in just a sec here. So the factors in this success really were the headless CMS that we built using the KB API. And I use headless CMS a little bit loosely, but I'll explain it more in a moment. What this really has done is it's allowed us to provide edit access to these documents to the subject matter experts, so that they weren't waiting on us to make all of the edits. And there's a few safeguards that we put into place that I'll talk about. But the headless CMS using KB API is key in this. Also, we've created templates and a style guide for the editors to use. We've collaborated with them by making ourselves available, by freeing up our time. And we've also delegated the responsibilities. So we've had a clear team structure that's allowed us to know who's in charge of what information, and have a nice ability to have a streamlined process to know who to talk to. Our SME teams, I think I might talk about that somewhere else, but our SME teams each had a leader, and it made it quite a bit more streamlined to delegate those responsibilities. So I'll jump into the headless CMS right away. If you want to take a look at this at all, you can take a look at, you can find the website here on hr.wisc.edu/HR guides. You can also find this just by going to hr.wisc.edu, and you can find a link from the homepage. So it's an internal KB space. The documents only appear on the OHR site. They don't appear on KB in any public form. Each SME team member can be an author, and the SMEs can create the documents and they can update them after they've been published. But my team actually has to do the initial publishing to the site, to our website, before they can make any changes that are shown publicly on the web. I'll show you how we do that. What this does is it gives the SMEs a lot of control over the information, but we're still able to retain oversight on its form and function and review it before anything goes public. So in KB, there's group space settings. To set this up, what we did is we created a KB space and activated only the internal space and left the external site inactive. Then we provided the group space a list of allowed APIs. This allowed us to authorize our server to make requests against the API. Then what we did is we created a user in KB that became the credentials that our application used to connect to the API. And then once we had that, once we had the credentials and we had the allowed APIs, we were able to start pulling requests from the KB articles. To do this, as you can see in this code snippet, we use curl. We're a WordPress website. It's PHP, so we use curl. You can see, let's see if my laser's working. So you can see here we're sending the credentials that we created for the user. And we're also sending the request in including the ID of the individual KB article that we're targeting. And then the response that we get back is JSON. So that includes all of the markup that we've created in the KB article itself. As I said before, when our SME teams draft these articles, they aren't able to put it on the website, but they are able to edit it after we've published it. So the way that we're publishing these is we're just creating a regular page on our HR.whisk website in our HR guides directory. And we're using this short code. So as you can see, the ID here, that's what gets passed back into that curl that's requesting that's requesting the article to be returned from KB. And what's really helpful with the shortcode is it lets us put the markup from the KB really anywhere on our page or anywhere on our site, anywhere that we need it. And it's become very helpful. We've expanded on this quite a bit. We've been finding a lot of uses beyond just our HR guides for ATP and Workday, and finding that it's really helpful for providing access for some of our functional areas that might need to manage a calendar, a list of dates, things like that. And we want to have it on the website, but we don't necessarily want to give them edit access to a more complicated part of the site. It's like a table of dates or something funny that can be a little bit problematic to give out access to a number of editors on. But we are able to give them access generally to the KB space and let them edit those. So we're finding a lot of uses for that and managing various content that really the functional areas should be able to manage. But typically there's a delay that they're subjected to, where they have to request my team to make those edits for them. So this is what the documents usually look like. It's usually something a little bit like this. Most of them are step-by-step guides. There's a variety of other things. There's calendars. There's a variety of other things. But for the most part, in the HR guides, it's step-by-step guides that walk the reader through the process of the cutover activity, or whatever the new process in Workday is. And then once we created these pages, we're just adding them to a directory. So we have a couple levels. We have the HR guides, and then within the HR guides landing page, there's 3 directories. There's one for employees, one for managers and supervisors, and then one for HR professionals. And then within each of those directories, there's a dozen or more topics. As you can see, that each of these are jump links into the various topics within these audience pages. So like I said, I think it's like a dozen or so for each, and then there's subcategories within those. So some of these audience pages are just jam-packed with information, especially the HR professionals. There's a lot of information that they're taking in right now. So let's talk about how the API helped to empower the subject matter experts. the API put us in a position of servant leadership. Since most of the publishing process was automated, that provided my team more time to work with the subject matter experts that were making the content. So that allowed us to provide a lot more consultation and help them build content that was more consistent across the different functional areas and across the different SME teams that weren't necessarily always coordinating with themselves. So this allowed us the time to maintain a style guide, to host office hours that the SME teams could attend, to get assistance with working with KB or with developing their content. And overall, this has allowed my team to have a lot more availability throughout these critical months that have been leading up to this July 7th go live date. So as I mentioned before, we had delegated responsibility. So we had SME teams, we had the web and comms and internal consultation and leadership involvement in this. So when we created the SME teams, we had a delegated lead for each of those. The teams consisted of members of the HR community from campuses, well, from divisions across campus. Different HR teams within divisions across campus were collaborating on understanding the new processes, what's changed, and what information needed to be shared out with the broader community. And then we formed a team internally with our webs, our communications, and we have a HR COP group, which is our HR communities of practice that's already networked with a lot of the HR groups throughout campus. And we've acted sort of as the consultation side that worked with these teams and helped them bring their information to life. And then we coordinated with leadership for various topics that needed leadership input or consultation on that leadership level. A really powerful component to this was our style guide. So what our style guide did was it provided examples of the visual layouts that the SME teams could use when they're producing these documents, and provided easy to use copy and paste snippets of HTML that they could paste into place. It also contained examples of writing styles. So based on the UW-Madison editorial style guide and other writing styles that we have internally to OHR that our comms people follow. And what was really helpful with using these styles in KB, with a little bit of clever JavaScript, I was able to swap out the editor window. They use TinyMCE as the editor, the WYSIWYG editor in KB. I was able to swap out the styles that KB has by default and put the OHR styles in there, so that when our SME teams were editing, they were seeing the styles that would actually appear on the front end of our site. Made it a little bit easier for those teams to kind of understand exactly what they're producing, and reduces the amount of input that my team will have to get, because I don't want it to look broken. So I'm going to wrap up with this, with the results. HR teams are actively using these documents. We've had over 30,000 page views in the past couple months. It's about 16,000 sessions. And from our data, it looks like there might be thousands of, like as many as 4,000 users, but that number gets inflated a little bit. And I think it shows that we've had at least about 1,000 or so visitors browsing these documents in the past couple months. And it shows that they're actively using this to prepare for Workday Go Live. And at the same time, The revisions to the documents have also increased, but this hasn't created the bottleneck that we had feared. We've seen hundreds of minor revisions to the documents, and thankfully, since we've empowered the subject matter experts to use the API-based headless CMS to make their edits, it's kept our time freed up to help them produce better documents. So this doesn't feel like Regent Street after a game. Our team still has bandwidth, and me being here today, I think is a testament to the fact that I've been able to get away from my computer for a couple hours and go talk about what we've been working on. And that feels pretty good. So I want to thank you all for giving me your time today. I hope you all enjoy the conference, and let me know if you have any other questions about the API. Yeah, thanks.
All right, thank you so much, Jonathan. Does anyone have any questions? We also have a prompt for anyone who's here hybrid. They can go ahead and put them in the chat. Let me know, I can run the mic to you. Seems you covered everything.
Yeah.
Beautiful.
Good.
Awesome. Well, thank you again.
Yeah, thank you.
All right, and as we finish up this session, it is now lunchtime, so you're free to go enjoy